You say too, obviously we have some students here, talented students from the Art Institute of Philadelphia, and even more important to the mother or the father who are watching right now, have a young child who maybe is drawing all the time. Now, art's a risky business. I mean, you could end up broke, living, in a little place, or you can end up making millions of dollars like you. What basic advice do you give to a parent?
Well, I think the most important thing is the kid, if he's going to cut it at all in the art game, has to be honest with himself. It's searching for the truth and doing it your way.
So Leroy Neiman was an artist. He was a popular and very commercially successful artist. And that's one of the interesting things about him, is that he wanted to be a high artist. He wanted to make work that would wind up in museums and exhibits. But most of the work that made him popular was the kind of work that you would see in popular culture, illustrations for magazines, so on and so forth. And so he kind of struggled to figure out his identity between those two worlds of the commercial art and high art. Well, the book kind of follows his life story from the time he was born, literally, until the time he passed away. And it sort of charts his rise as this kind of self-made artist who wound up going to art school in Chicago after serving in the military during World War II, and kind of hooked up with some of the people involved in Playboy magazine. Kind of discovered Leroy Neiman mostly through research I was doing for a previous book on ABC Sports. And I had learned that they would hire him to sketch events that they were covering, like the Olympics and events on the show Wide World of Sports. And I just thought it was bizarre that a sports media outlet would hire an artist to sketch events on camera. Well, I mean, a lot of the stuff that Leroy Neiman did that made him famous was oriented around sport. So I didn't have to stray very far to get there, but I've always been interested in biography as a genre. I've always liked reading biographies, and I always wanted to try to write one. But it's one thing to want to write a biography, and it's another thing to find a topic that's worth pursuing. So as far as being perceived by society, I think Leroy Neiman he was very popular amongst sports fans. He was very popular amongst people who read Playboy magazine. He was very popular, but amongst the kind of more high cultural crowd, the folks who curate museum exhibits and so forth, he was seen as kind of not necessarily an imposter, but somebody who just didn't do that kind of work. And so he was, as the subtitle of the book says, beloved and belittled. He was somebody who was probably the only artist that a lot of people could mention offhand, but also somebody who was kind of a punchline in the art establishment. And Playboy was a controversial magazine, especially early on, not just because of the nude photographs, but also because the subject matter that it would tackle, things like birth control, questioning the church, those kinds of things were things that Playboy was interested in, pushing back against censorship, those kinds of issues. And so on the one hand, Neiman got a lot of attention from Playboy and the readership of Playboy. But on the other hand, that attention was not necessarily the kind of attention that he would have hoped to have got. It was profitable, and it certainly made him into a celebrity, but it didn't necessarily make him respectable. And so he kind of had to make that decision and that compromise, and he did. And he kind of wanted to have it both ways. If he would have had it his way, he would have been both really popular, really wealthy, and also really respected. But that's a hard thing to accomplish in the art world, and only a very, very small handful of people can do that. As far as the Burger King partnership, when Neiman was working with ABC and the Olympics with their coverage, he became really kind of identified with the Olympics coverage, and Burger King decided to partner with him to give away posters of some of his paintings with the purchase of a sandwich at Burger King. So I guess like a Whopper or whatever the equivalent was at the time. And, again, just like the relationship to Playboy, if you are partnering with a fast food restaurant, your identity is going to be linked to that fast food restaurant. And so, again, he got a lot of exposure from this. People who normally probably didn't have a lot of access to museums, to art history courses, that kind of stuff. Suddenly they were exposed to this artist's work, and they were basically purchasing this artist's work or getting it for free with the purchase of a meal. But that's not the kind of crowd that is typically associated with fine art or art appreciation. And so folks from that world saw that as something that was kind of cheap and tacky. I think nowadays Leroy would be seen a little bit differently. I think those hierarchies about what constitutes fine art and what constitutes popular art are still in place, but I do think that we're a little more accepting of self-promotion and commercialism, and a kind of transparency about self-promotion and commercialism than maybe we were during Neiman's time. I don't think that he would be, considered like a fine artist today, but I think people would have been a little bit less cruel to him in their assessments than they were during his time. And he would have been great on social media. He would have loved Instagram and TikTok, and that would have been I think he would have excelled in that platform, or in those platforms. I think it's a really fascinating story that's sort of uniquely American. He was almost like a Forrest Gump type figure. He was just sort of everywhere in his time. He hung out with Muhammad Ali and Joe Namath and Liberace and all of these folks. And he's kind of a thread that brings popular culture together in, I think, pretty interesting ways. And he was also just kind of a goofball. I find him kind of funny and sort of lovable in a weird way. And so I hope that they're able to enjoy the story of Leroy Neiman's life, but also think about some of the cultural issues that this book is trying to explore, as far as artistic hierarchies, taste cultures, that kind of stuff.